Prime Minister Modi has had a super successful visit to Japan. He's talked tough with China. All eyes are now focused on his big high voltage visit to the United States. What can India expect and what will PM Modi be able to deliver? Joining us on the center stage face-off tonight, I want to begin by introducing Lisa Curtis. She's a senior research fellow at the Asian Studies Center of Heritage Foundation in Washington, D.C. Thank you very much, ma'am. Joining us in our New Delhi studios, we've got Gardner Harris, South Asia correspondent of the New York Times, Dr. Lalit Mansingh, former Foreign Secretary, also former ambassador to the United States. With us also Sambit Patra from the BJP, and Brahma Chalani is joining us on this broadcast. I want to go across first to Gardner Harris because we've seen Prime Minister Modi score twice in Indian public opinion, first with his big visit to Japan, now when he's talking tough with China, and now all eyes are on Modi going to America and dazzle Washington. Will he be able to do so? What can work in his favor and what will work against him?
Well, I think the most important part of his trip is he's going to dazzle New York first. He's going to have his big thing at Madison Square Garden. It's the first time we're going to see in the United States an extraordinary, dynamic prime minister, at least the first time in a long, long time. New York is the center of the media world, really. I think it is going to be an extraordinary introduction to Narendra Modi on the world stage, also, of course, at the UN General Assembly meeting. And so, and what Washington listens to is that sort of power, the power of people behind you. And he will have, you know, for the first time, this is going to be a coming out party of Indian Americans. And I think that that will resonate strongly in Washington. Now, if you count up the sort of agreements that they're going to have with Obama, it's not going to wow you. But Narendra Modi has changed entirely the way you measure these visits. You know, there weren't that many great agreements in Japan. He had a great trip because he's Narendra Modi. So this new kind of dynamic is going to play out, I think, very strong in the United States.
Lisa Curtis, how often do world leaders come to New York, take up Madison Square Garden, throw a party where 30,000 of their nationals come, and there is a rock concert like atmosphere? Does it happen often in New York? How many leaders have done it, and what are your expectations building up to Prime Minister Modi's big visit?
No, in fact, I think this is probably the first foreign leader that has held an enormous Madison Square Garden. So this is definitely a first. I think it will be a huge event. And I think the stage is being set for a successful visit to Washington. It comes in the wake of successful visits with major Asian nations. You mentioned the wildly successful visit to Japan, the Australian Prime Minister's visit to India, where he solidified uranium sales to India, this most recent visit with China, in which you rightly indicated, I think he sent a signal of strength by calling for the demarcation of the line of actual control, yet also made clear that India wanted strong economic ties with China. So it is important that his visit to the U.S. is equally successful, if not more successful, than these recent engagements that he's been having. But I think we need to be clear that we don't necessarily need some major initiative announced along the lines of the civil nuclear deal for the visit to be successful. I think we simply need both sides to explain clearly why the relationship is important and to make sure they focus on those areas of mutual interest rather than potential areas of tension, and that they put aside the past.
You've set this debate up very nicely by making two important points. One, on what is defined, Dr. Lalit Mansingh, as a successful visit. Modi's critics would argue that his trips to Japan, for example, and to Ahmedabad were high on optics, very low on delivery. Is that fair criticism? Is that what will happen in the United States as well? Or do you think his visits so far have been successful and will be the case with the visit to New York?
Well, I don't think we should compare the visit to Japan with the visit to the US. First of all, the US has two segments. New York is multilateral. Washington is bilateral. In between, you have the huge community function in New York. Now, what you expect in Washington is for Mr. Modi to know Obama better, and in that private dinner that he's going to have before the talks start the next morning, he will have a chance of discussing a number of sensitive and important issues and getting a measure of what Obama's thinking is. I don't think you should expect spectacular outcomes of this visit. It's not intended. It's also not a ceremonial visit. It won't have a guard of honor and the kind of banquet at the White House where his predecessors had. Therefore, I think we should measure expectations and judge the visit in terms of how much they can do to repair the damage that has been done to the relationship in the past 2 years, and how much they can focus on the remaining years of the Obama administration and move forward in areas like trade, in defense cooperation, and in a whole host of other important areas.
Brahmacharani, there is a big difference between Prime Minister Modi meeting the leaders of Japan and China and the United States, and that difference is that with the United States there is the past history of being denied a visa. Will that play in Modi's mind at all? The fact that here is a country that didn't allow him to come in, now riding on a majority of 280 seats, he's actually being welcomed with open arms.
Well, Mr. Modi very clearly in his term decided that he would give priority to national interests, and the personal umbrage that he felt, he has set that aside, and he was very quick to accept President Obama's invitation to visit the White House. The problem is this, that he's visiting Washington at a time when President Obama is beset with crises at home and abroad. He's just starting a new war in the Middle East, for example, but he also has problems back home. He feels increasingly beleaguered. In fact, Mr. Obama appears increasingly as a lame duck president. So the contrast between a newly empowered Modi and a fading Obama could not be starker. So we are not going to expect any high-profile agreements. I think the real issue facing both Obama and Modi is to help restore momentum to the US-India relationship, which is a very critical relationship both in terms of Asian security dynamics, but also in terms of the larger, broader international security.
Sambit Patra, where does the United States fit in Modi's grand design? We've seen he's clearly been preoccupied with the neighborhood, starting off with Bhutan, Nepal. That's been his core area of concern. Then he's also looking east. In this whole Modi global vision, where does the US fit in your view?
No, definitely US fits in a very important position, and that's the result as to why in the Look West design, the first country that we are visiting is America. And I mean, as most of my predecessors have very optimistically pointed out to the fact that this would be something which we all are looking forward towards. Both the countries, America as well as India, are two powerful democracies of this globe. And it's but natural that when two very powerful leaders, Mr. Narendra Modi and Mr. Obama, would meet, surely the world would have the eyeballs on these two leaders as to what comes out of it. This would definitely, I mean, like someone previous to me was setting out the tone by saying that, well, yes, lot has been damaged in the previous 2 years and it has to be undone. And we also have to remember one thing, that Rahul, that after 30 long years, India has a government which does not have compulsions of coalition. It is a stable government. So definitely all the decisions taken by this government.
No, but while Modi is in a stable government at this time and his star is on the ascendant, Obama, Gardner Harris, is plagued by problems domestically and internationally. Does that then impact what this meeting can deliver as Prime Minister Modi goes to the United States to find President Obama right at the end of his presidency?
Right. I think it was set up exactly right. I mean, Obama is far from the end of his presidency as 2.5 years. So there is a lot of time left on his clock. But I think one of the more fundamental problems is that the Indians and the Americans often talk past each other. You know, these are two very different systems. I was talking with the ambassador here a little bit before, and Indians sort of don't quite understand that the president isn't actually as powerful as the Indians constantly think he is or should be. He can't promise $30 billion investments like the Japanese, or $20 billion like the Chinese. Those decisions are made by executives, not really by Obama. So this is why I think Mr. Modi is coming into the United States exactly in the right way, which is that he is coming in, he's having this meeting at Madison Square Garden, he is showing that he has political power, not just in India, but he actually has some political power in the United States, and that leads to enormous respect in Washington. So the hope is that with this sort of great introduction to the United States, that he can cut deals not just now at the end of the Obama administration, but going forward perhaps for the next 10 years if he, is successful in getting 2 terms in India. So this is an extremely important beginning for him.
Lisa Curtis, in this morning in the People's Daily, there were 4 pictures of Prime Minister Modi with the Chinese president. That's the sort of prominence he got in state media in China. But Prime Minister Modi goes to the United States at a time when virtually all the world's important leaders will be in New York, and naturally attention of the media, attention of lawmakers in Washington, attention of the American government also will be split. Can you give us a sense of whether there is any excitement at all around Prime Minister Modi's visit, or is it just one of the many things that will happen in New York next week?
Well, I think there is excitement about Prime Minister Modi's visit, of course, the New York engagements, but also the White House engagements. And whereas maybe there has been some disappointment among the U.S. business community with the past government, I think what we're seeing is the U.S. Business Committee is re-energized, and they have a lot of faith, a lot of hope in the new Modi government. So I would say there is a lot of excitement, but there's also a lot going on in the world. And this points up the need for this visit to go well. And for President Obama, he really has been getting a lot of criticism here in the U.S. for not handling the myriad crises that are happening around the world, whether it be Iraq, the Ebola crisis. He's really come under the fire for mishandling some of the crises that the U.S. and everyone around the world is facing. So I think this visit could be somewhat of a respite from this pressure that Obama is facing, because here the U.S. has a partner in India, a partner with like-minded interests, wanting to counter terrorism, a democracy. I think that they can really build on these commonalities of interest during such a volatile
Lalit Mansingh, one of the
period.
problems over the past 24 odd months has been the fact that investor confidence amongst American businessmen has gone down. They're very wary with constant rule changes, retrospective taxation. Do you think Prime Minister Modi's presence on US soil will be enough? The fact that he's won with the majority that he has, the fact that he's saying the things that he has, will that be enough to restore American confidence, or are investors more likely to be very circumspect to first see what happens on the ground, what changes he's able to bring in before actually committing money again?
Well, we've seen the scene changing in recent times. Before Mr. Modi came, in anticipation of his winning, the stock markets went up. After the budget was presented, the stock market went up even further. Foreign investors who are withdrawing money are putting the money back, both through the FII and the FDI route. The budget has created openings for higher FDI caps in insurance and in the defense sector. And now we understand that construction sector will also be made more attractive. So I think there is excitement in the American business circles that not only are the concerns of the past 2 years taken care of in terms of taxation and investor unfriendly laws, but the Indian economy is opening up and is showing signs of significant revival. So that whole scenario with the business has changed. One smart thing that Mr. Modi is doing, he's not confining his business discussions to President Obama and the administration. He's talking to American business directly with the CEOs of major companies and through various interactive sessions that he's having. So this is a different approach, and everybody knows his business-like approach to business. I think he's creating...
But Brahmachalani, critics can argue that so far there has been no big-ticket reform process that's been initiated. It's not as if Modi's made it any easier to do business with India. So far there's been intent, there's been statements coming out, but very little on the ground. Is that enough to get American investors excited, or will they actually first wait to see what real changes he can bring.
Mr. Modi has been in office for barely 4 months, and in those 4 months, at least he's provided better direction to India's foreign policy. For example, for somebody who had little experience in diplomacy, he has pursued very nimble, high-powered diplomacy, investing tremendous political capital in reaching out to some of India's smaller neighbors, but also reaching out to Japan, China, and now to the United States. So on the foreign policy front, he has much to show. On the economic side, I think some of his steps, including defense sector reforms, raising the FDI cap in defense industry, should be very appealing to American businesses, because very likely we're going to see a 10-year extension of the US-India Defense Framework Agreement. And as part of this extension, the emphasis will shift from direct sale of complete weapon systems to India, which has made the United States very quietly the largest supplier of arms to India. We're going to see a shift from that pattern to co-production under Mr. Modi. And I think there will be tremendous business opportunities for US businesses in this area. So there is some excitement in the United States that Mr. Modi, even in the economic area, is treading the right path, and that gradually we'll see more business opportunities for the American businesses.
Gardner Harris, is it fair to suggest that in Japan and in China there is greater excitement about the India story with the amount of money that is being committed, while in the United States companies are still rather wary, still waiting to see how things pan out under Prime Minister Modi before committing big sums, that the excitement in the East is not necessarily shared by excitement in the West?
So in Japan and China, you only have to persuade one person to get the investments, right? I mean, these investments are directed by governments. In the United States, the investments are directed by hundreds, if not thousands, of business individuals. The government actually has very little to do with these investments. And unlike the previous guest, I am less optimistic about this. I think Modi has so far shown himself to be a fixer, not really a reformer. He believes that the present system in India simply needs to be done more efficiently and sort of better, but he has yet to show that he thinks that you need to fundamentally change that system. Again, it's only been 4 months, but there has yet to be real signs of fundamental reform. So far, this is UPA 3, not a fundamental difference.
That's a very important point, and I want Sambit Patra to respond to it, that he's been so far more of a fixer than a reformer. So far, this government seems like UPA 3 than something which resets the manner in which India does business with the world and world does business with India.
Not at all. I believe the intention of this government has been extremely clear and laid down in words also by Mr. Narendra Modi in Japan, that for all the investors, those who will be coming to India, we would have red carpet and not red tapeism. And Mr. Modi has already proved it while he had a stint in Gujarat as a Gujarat's chief minister. It was always an investor-friendly state. We had seen most of the homework has been done as a chief minister, which is reflecting today as a prime minister in Japan or in China itself. So within a span of 4 months, the kind of policy paralysis that the previous UPA dispensation had has already been done away with. And remember, I mean, as far as investors is concerned, 2 things are very important: the environmental clearances and all. We have already fast-tracked the environmental clearance process. This is a very important issue. And secondly, we have always promised that there would be no red tapeism and things would be in a finer way, they would be addressed. So at the end of the day, the intention of the government is extremely clear. We would be attracting the investors, we would be having smooth business in India. In fact, the retrograde taxation issue also had been addressed in the first budget itself. So I believe most of the concerning issues as far as the investors are concerned has been taken care of, and the larger issue of intention of this government is extremely clear.
Okay, you're saying the intention is clear from your perspective, but till the time American companies start believing in that, we're not going to be able to attract investment in India, which is what is required. One final question to Lisa Curtis before we end this broadcast. Ma'am, do you believe this visit will be high on optics but low on actual delivery? Some people suggesting that even with China there was a lot of very good photo opportunities along the Sabarmati River, but nothing really emerged which was substantial. Is that the way it's likely to be in Washington as well, or do you believe that substance will back the photo opportunities?
Well, I would say, obviously, you probably won't see the same kind of bear hug that you saw between Prime Minister Modi and Prime Minister Abe in Japan. They have a history of a personal relationship. This will be the first time that Modi is meeting Obama, so you won't see that kind of, strong warmth. But at the same time, I think you will see two leaders who are genuinely happy to be meeting with each other. They'll have a lot to talk about, a lot to discuss. And the sheer fact that the visit is happening, it's happening early in Modi's administration. The White House was very quick to invite Modi to make clear that they wanted to put the visa issue in the past and welcome Modi with open arms. So I think the stage is set for a successful visit. But as I said in the beginning, that doesn't mean there's going to be the announcement of a major initiative along the lines of the civil nuclear deal, but that I think still it will be a successful visit. And the point made about the Chinese and the Japanese commitments of 20, 30 billion in investment, that's not the way the U.S. does business. And
sure.
It's more important that he engage directly with the business community, but it's also important the tone that is set by the U.S. administration. And I would just mention that Secretary Hagel had the Defense Secretary had a very successful visit to India, put a lot of deals and proposals on the table, and this sends a good signal back to the U.S. companies as well, that the U.S. has faith in this administration and is looking for new deals, new agreements to be made. So to the extent that Prime Minister Modi shows that he does want to make the system more efficient, clear through projects, clear out the backlog, I think that will also be important for the U.S. business
like
community.
India, America is a vibrant democracy, and in a democracy nothing speaks louder than people power. Imagine the scenes at Madison Square Garden when 30,000 odd people are chanting Modi, Modi. That might give Obama something to think about. I remember when Bill Clinton came to the India Today conclave in New Delhi, somebody remarked that he might win an election if he stood here. Maybe leaders in the United States too might go back with a similar feeling after the 28th of September when Modi's had his say at Madison Square Garden. Gardner Harris, Lalit Man Singh, Brahma Chalani, Sambit Patra, Lisa Curtis for joining us tonight. Thank you very much. Two big visits done. Whether they were successful and to what extent can be debated, but make no mistake, this is the month of big visits, and it doesn't get more high profile, more high voltage than Prime Minister Modi in New York. And Headlines Today's teams will be covering every aspect of this story.